A cold steel bench, the sterile, unforgiving scent of disinfectant. For 19-year-old Leo Nash, this was the end of a night that began with charcoal sketches and dreams of art school. Handcuffed and processed like a common criminal, his pleas of innocence were met with mocking laughter. The officers saw a black teenager in a worn-out car and built their own narrative of guilt. They didn't know the boy in their holding cell, the one they'd targeted and tormented, was about to make a single phone call that would detonate their careers, their department, and their entire world. They locked him up, believing they were untouchable. They were wrong. The night was cool and quiet, the kind of stillness that settles over the suburbs long after the last commuter train has pulled away. Leo Nash drove his mother's 10-year-old sedan, the engine humming a familiar, comforting tune. The passenger seat was littered with art supplies, sticks of willow charcoal, a portfolio of sketches, and a brand new set of oil paints he'd saved up for. He was heading home from a late-night session at a friend's makeshift studio, his mind buzzing with color theory and composition, not the looming threat of authority. He was humming along to a song on the radio, thinking about the texture of the canvas he'd stretched earlier, when the world behind him exploded in a silent kaleidoscope of red and blue. His heart hammered against his ribs, a sudden, primal fear that every black man is taught to feel before he even learns to drive. He checked his speedometer. Exactly the speed limit. He signaled, pulled over to the curb smoothly, and placed his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, just as his father had drilled into him 100 times. 2 officers emerged from the patrol car, their silhouettes stark against the blinding headlights. The older one, a man with a thick neck and a swagger that spoke of unshakable confidence, approached the driver's side. His name tag read, Miller. The younger officer, Carter, hung back by the passenger door, his hand resting near his sidearm, his eyes scanning the interior of the car with a nervous energy. "Evening," Officer Miller said, his voice laced with a bored sort of condescension. He leaned down, peering into the car. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, officer, I don't," Leo replied, keeping his voice even and respectful. "Your left tail light is out," Miller stated flatly. Leo knew for a fact it wasn't. He and his dad had checked all the lights just last weekend, but he also knew this wasn't the time to argue. "I'm sorry to hear that, officer. I wasn't aware," Leo said. "License and registration?" "License, registration, and proof of insurance, and keep your hands where I can see them," Miller ordered, his flashlight beam dancing across Leo's face, then into the car, lingering on the art supplies. Leo moved slowly, deliberately. He retrieved the documents from the glove compartment and handed them over. Miller snatched them, his eyes barely glancing at the name before returning his focus to the car's interior. "What's all this junk?" Miller asked, pointing the flashlight at the portfolio. "They're my art supplies, sir. I'm coming from a friend's house." "Art supplies," Miller scoffed, sharing a smirk with Carter. "Right. What's your real business out here tonight, son?" The word son was a barb, not an endearment. "I'm a student. I was just heading home," Leo insisted, the frustration starting to bubble beneath his calm exterior. "We'll see about that," Miller said. He handed the documents to Carter. "Run his name." Then he turned back to Leo. "Step out of the car, please." Leo's blood ran cold. "Officer, am I being detained? What for?" "For a broken tail light and for me telling you to. Now get out of the vehicle, slowly." Leo complied, his body rigid with a mixture of fear and indignation. As soon as he was standing, Miller roughly pushed him against the side of the car. "Spread 'em." "You have no reason to do this," Leo said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'll be the judge of that," Miller grunted, patting him down with unnecessary force. He found nothing but a wallet and a phone. While Miller was searching him, Carter began rummaging through the passenger seat. "Hey, Cade, look at this," Carter called out. He held up a palette knife, its metal edge glinting in the strobing lights. "Could be a weapon?" Miller's eyes lit up with a sick sense of victory. Well, well, well. Looks like our little artist came prepared for more than just painting. "That's a palette knife. It's for mixing paint," Leo exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," Miller snarled, yanking Leo's arms behind his back. "You're carrying a concealed weapon, and you fit the description of a suspect in a string of break-ins in this area." It was a lie, a complete fabrication, and they both knew it. There was no description. There was only Leo, a black teenager in the wrong place at the wrong time, in front of the wrong cop. "This is insane," Leo pleaded, looking at Carter, hoping for a shred of reason. "Tell him, you know what that is." Carter looked away, his face unreadable. He remained silent. The cold, sharp click of the handcuffs locking around Leo's wrists was a sound of finality. It was the sound of his identity being stripped away, replaced by a profile, a statistic. Miller shoved him toward the back of the patrol car. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller began, the words a hollow mockery of justice. As the car door slammed shut, trapping him in the cramped, plastic-molded seat, Leo looked out at his mother's car, its perfectly functional tail light glowing a defiant red in the darkness. In that moment, he wasn't the governor's son. He wasn't an artist or a student. He was just another black body in the system, swallowed by the glare of red and blue. The precinct was a monument to bureaucratic indifference. The air hung thick with the smells of stale coffee, cheap disinfectant, and a faint, underlying metallic tang of fear. Officer Miller paraded Leo through the main bullpen as if he were a prize catch, his hand clamped firmly on Leo's shoulder. The few officers still on duty barely looked up from their paperwork, their faces etched with the weary cynicism of the night shift. "Got another one," Miller announced to the desk sergeant, a portly, grey-haired man named Peterson. "Caught him prowling, armed with this." He dropped the palette knife into a plastic evidence bag with a theatrical flourish. Sergeant Peterson peered at the knife, then at Leo, his gaze dismissive. "An artist, huh? What was he going to do? Paint a masterpiece on the side of a house he was robbing?" He chuckled a dry, humorless laugh. "Something like that," Miller said, shoving Leo toward the booking desk. "Let's get him processed." The next hour was a blur of calculated humiliation. Leo was ordered to remove his shoes and his belt. His pockets were emptied, their meager contents, a tube of chapstick, a few dollars and a key to his house, catalogued and sealed away. He was fingerprinted, the cold, sticky ink coating his fingers, staining the very skin he used to create. The camera for the mugshot flashed, capturing not a person, but a suspect. Head forward, then profile, his expression a mixture of disbelief and simmering rage. Through it all, Leo tried to maintain his composure. "You have the wrong person," he said to Sergeant Peterson, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "My name is Leo Nash. My father is—" Peterson cut him off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, I've heard it all before, kid. My father's a lawyer. My uncle's a judge. Save it. You get one phone call after you're in the cell. They led him down a short, echoing hallway to the holding cells. The clang of the heavy metal door shutting behind him was deafening, a sound of absolute finality. The cell was tiny, cold, and smelled faintly of vomit and despair. A single metal bench was bolted to the wall. He sat down, the cold seeping through his jeans, and put his head in his hands. Back in the patrol car, Officer Carter drove in silence, the tension thick enough to cut with the palette knife now sitting in evidence. Miller, on the other hand, was buzzing, high on the adrenaline of the arrest. "See how easy that was?" Miller said, tapping a rhythm on the dashboard. "Textbook. Kid was lippy, had a weapon, matched the bolo we got last week." "There was no bolo, Cade," Carter said quietly, his eyes fixed on the road. "And you know that was a painting tool." "Details, details," Miller scoffed. "It's a blade, isn't it? He's a punk. Looked suspicious the second I saw him. My gut is never wrong. We put a good arrest on the books tonight. The lieutenant will be pleased." Carter didn't respond. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He'd seen Miller do this before, escalate a minor stop, invent a pretext, and bully his way to an arrest. Carter was only 2 years on the force, and Miller was his training officer, a respected veteran. Questioning him meant trouble, meant being labeled soft, meant risking his own career. So he stayed quiet, just as he had on the side of the road. But the image of Leo's face, the genuine shock and betrayal in his eyes, was seared into his mind. This felt different. This felt wrong. In his cell, Leo was finally given his phone call. The guard led him to a grimy phone bolted to the wall. He dialed his father's personal number, his heart pounding with a desperate hope. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. "You've reached Robert Nash. Please leave a message." Leo's throat tightened. His father was likely in a late-night budget meeting, his phone silenced. "Dad," Leo began, his voice cracking. "Dad, it's me. I've been arrested. I'm at the Northwood precinct. Some cop named Miller. He said my taillight was out, but it wasn't. He found my palette knife and called it a weapon. Dad, I didn't do anything. Please call me back. I don't know what to do." He hung up the phone, the feeling of hopelessness washing over him like an icy wave. The guard led him back to the cell, the metal door groaning shut once more. He was alone, trapped inside the cold, impersonal machinery of a system that had already decided who he was. And the one person who could help him had no idea he was even there. Governor Robert Nash rubbed his temples, the fluorescent lights of the conference room, a dull ache behind his eyes. The state budget meeting had dragged on for hours, a grueling marathon of fiscal projections and political compromises. Finally, at close to 1 a.m., it was over. He walked wearily back to his private office in the Capitol building, loosening his tie. All he wanted was to go home, pour a small glass of whiskey, and forget about state deficits until morning. He sank into his leather chair and picked up his phone, wincing at the string of missed notifications. Most were from his chief of staff and various department heads. But one stood out, a missed call and a voicemail from Leo. A small smile touched his lips. He imagined Leo was calling to complain about his mum's car or to ask for money for more art supplies. He pressed play on the voicemail, leaning back in his chair. The sound of his son's voice, strained and cracking with fear, shot him upright. "Dad, I've been arrested. Northwood precinct. Miller. Palette knife. A weapon. I didn't do anything." The world around Robert Nash went silent. The budget, the state, the late hour. It all vanished. The governor disappeared, and in his place was only a father, his heart seized by a cold, terrifying dread. He played the message again, listening to every tremble, every desperate word. Northwood. That was a quiet, affluent suburb. What in God's name was going on? His mind raced, piecing it together. Leo, driving his mother's unassuming car, profiled and pulled over. An ambitious or prejudiced cop escalating the situation. It was a story he'd heard 1,000 times, a reality he had fought against his entire political career. He had always tried to shield his son from the harsh realities that came with being a young black man in America. But the world had found him anyway. A wave of pure, unadulterated fury washed over him, so intense it made his hands shake. But he suppressed it, channeling it into a cold, hard resolve. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Action was required. He didn't call his security detail or his attorney first. His first call was to the superintendent of the state police, a man he knew well. "Colonel Jennings, this is Governor Nash. I apologize for the late hour." "Governor, no apology necessary. What can I do for you?" Jennings's voice was instantly alert. "I need you to get me the personal cell number for Chief Frank Brody of the Northwood Police Department. Immediately." There was a brief pause. "Is everything all right, sir?" "No, Colonel, it is not. My son has been arrested and is being held at the Northwood precinct. I want Chief Brody's number, and I want you to have a state trooper meet me there. Unmarked car. No sirens." "Right away, Governor." Within a minute, his phone buzzed with a text message containing the number. He dialed it without hesitation. It was answered on the second ring by a groggy voice. "Brody. Chief Brody, this is Governor Robert Nash." The fogginess in the chief's voice evaporated instantly. "Governor, to what do I owe the honor? Is everything okay?" "No, Chief, it's not," Robert said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I just received a voicemail from my son, Leo Nash. He tells me he's currently a guest in one of your holding cells, arrested by an Officer Miller. Perhaps you can explain to me why my 19-year-old son, an art student with no criminal record, was arrested tonight for carrying a palette knife." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Robert could practically hear the gears turning in Brody's head, the frantic search for information, the dawning horror. "Governor, I had no idea," Brody stammered. "I'm not at the precinct. I haven't been briefed on the night's arrests." "Then I suggest you get briefed, Chief. And I suggest you do it quickly." Robert's voice was like ice. "I am on my way to your station right now. I expect my son to be waiting for me in your office, unharmed, and I expect a full and complete explanation for this incident. Am I making myself clear?" "Crystal clear, Governor. I'm on my way now. I'll handle it personally," Brody assured him, his voice now tight with panic. Robert Nash hung up the phone without another word. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out of his office. The political mask was gone. The calm, measured negotiator had been replaced by something far more formidable, a father whose child was in trouble. The Northwood Police Department had just arrested a boy. They were about to face the man who ran the state. The Northwood precinct remained an island of mundane activity, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Officer Cade Miller was at his desk, typing up his incident report with a self-satisfied smirk. He embellished with practiced ease, turning a simple traffic stop into a proactive measure against potential crime. He described Leo's confusion as evasiveness and his pleas of innocence as belligerence. The palette knife was logged as a modified blade concealed within the vehicle. It was a work of fiction designed to justify his actions, a fortress of words to protect him from any scrutiny. His partner, Ben Carter, sat at the adjacent desk, staring at a blank screen. He hadn't written a single word of his own supplementary report. The unease in his gut had grown into a nauseating dread. Every word Miller typed felt like another brick being laid in a wall of lies, and Carter knew he was being cemented inside it with him. "You should get that report done," Miller said without looking up from his screen. "The sooner it's filed, the sooner we can forget about this punk." "I'm just thinking," Carter mumbled. Don't think too hard, Miller advised. It was a good bust. End of story. At the front desk, Sergeant Peterson was halfway through a crossword puzzle when the phone rang. It was the chief's administrative line, which was unusual at this hour. He answered with a gruff, "Peterson." The voice on the other end was frantic. "Sergeant, this is dispatch. The chief is en route to the station. ETA 5 minutes. He's asking for the arrest report for a—" "Leo Nash?" Peterson frowned, the name ringing a vague bell. "Nash. Nash. Oh, the artist kid Miller brought in an hour ago. What's the chief want with that for?" "I don't know, but he sounds agitated," the dispatcher said. "He wants the arresting officers, Miller and Carter, to meet him in his office the second he arrives." Peterson hung up, bewildered. He lumbered over to Miller's desk. "Hey, Miller, the chief is on his way in. He wants to see you and Carter about your arrest tonight. The Nash kid." Miller looked up from his report, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "What, did the kid's mummy call to complain? It's 1 a.m. What's so damn important?" "Beats me," Peterson grunted, turning to walk back to his desk. But he didn't sound happy. A seed of unease was planted in Miller's mind, but he quickly dismissed it. The chief was a stickler for procedure. He probably just wanted to cross his T's and dot his I's. Then the main precinct line rang. Peterson answered it, his voice already dripping with irritation. After a moment, his eyes went wide. He held the phone away from his ear, staring at it as if it were a venomous snake. "Who was it?" Carter asked, noticing the sudden change in the sergeant's demeanor. Peterson swallowed hard, his face pale. That was Colonel Jennings's office, from the state police." Now Miller was paying attention. He stood up. "The state police? What about?" "They wanted to confirm that a minor by the name of Leo Nash was in our custody," Peterson said, his voice barely a whisper. "And they informed me that Governor Robert Nash is personally en route to this precinct." The name hit the room like a physical blow. Governor Robert Nash. Miller stared at Peterson, his mind refusing to connect the dots. "Nash? No way. The kid in the cell?" Carter felt the blood drain from his face. The name on the registration. He hadn't even processed it, just typed it into the system. Leonora Nash. The mother. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. He looked at Miller, whose cocky bravado had completely vanished, replaced by a ghastly, ashen terror. "Kate," Carter whispered, his voice trembling. "His dad." The sound of tires screeching to a halt in the parking lot cut through the sudden, deathly silence of the bullpen. A car door slammed. Heavy, furious footsteps echoed on the pavement outside. Sergeant Peterson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Miller stood frozen, his half-finished, falsified report glowing on the screen in front of him. A digital monument to the single worst decision of his life. The ticking bomb had just gone off. Chief Frank Brody burst through the doors, his face a thunderous mask of fury and panic. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the 3 shell-shocked officers. "Where is he?" Brody roared, his voice shaking the windows. "Where is the governor's son?" Chief Brody's presence filled the precinct with an immediate, suffocating pressure. He was a man who was usually calm and collected, a politician in a police uniform. To see him this way, his face flushed with rage, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity, sent a shockwave through the room. He didn't wait for an answer to his own question. He stormed past the booking desk, his gaze fixed on the hallway leading to the holding cells. "Get him out of there, now!" he bellowed over his shoulder at a stunned Sergeant Peterson. Peterson fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the correct one into the lock. He hurried down the hallway, with Brody right on his heels. Miller and Carter stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their blunder. The sound of the cell door being unlocked echoed back into the bullpen. Leo, who had been sitting with his head in his hands, looked up, startled. He saw the portly desk sergeant, and behind him, a man in a suit, whose face was a storm of conflicting emotions. "Leo Nash?" Chief Brodie asked, his voice suddenly softer, though still strained. "I'm Chief Brodie. There's been a terrible mistake. Please come with me." Leo stood up slowly, his mind reeling. He was escorted out of the cell and back into the main room, where he saw them. Officer Miller and Officer Carter, standing like statues, their faces pale and slick with sweat. Miller's eyes met his for a fraction of a second, and in them, Leo didn't see arrogance or authority. He saw pure, unadulterated fear. Get this young man his property. Get him a drink of water. Get him anything he needs, Brodie ordered Peterson, his voice regaining its sharp edge as he turned his attention to the two officers who had caused the catastrophe. He strode toward them, his steps slow and deliberate, each one landing like a hammer blow. He stopped directly in front of Miller. "My office. Both of you. 5 minutes," he said through clenched teeth. He then turned to Leo. "Young man, I cannot begin to express how sorry I am. We are going to sort this out. Your father is on his way." The mention of his father sent another jolt through Leo. It was real. His dad was coming. The cavalry was actually on its way. As Peterson returned his wallet, keys, and phone, Leo was led to the chief's office. It was a spacious room, filled with plaques and commendations that now seemed like relics from another era. He sat in a plush visitor's chair, the soft leather a stark contrast to the cold metal bench of the cell. A few minutes later, Miller and Carter entered, their movements stiff and robotic. They stood before the chief's desk like schoolboys awaiting punishment. Brodie sat behind his desk, his hand steepled, his expression grim. "I just got off the phone with the governor," Brodie began, his voice deceptively calm. He was, shall we say, displeased. He told me his son was arrested for carrying a palette knife. "Officer Miller, that was your arrest. Please, enlighten me." Miller swallowed hard. "Chief, with all due respect, the suspect was uncooperative. He was in an area with recent break-ins, and he was carrying what could be construed as a weapon." "A palette knife?" Brodie interrupted, his voice rising. "Are you telling me that you, a 15-year veteran, can't tell the difference between a weapon and an art tool? Did you find anything else on him? Anything illegal at all?" "No, sir, but nothing." Brodie slammed his hand on the desk, making all three men jump. "You arrested a kid with no record, for no reason, based on a lie about a broken taillight. Don't think I won't check the dashcam footage. And you trumped up a charge because you didn't like the look of him. Is that about the size of it?" Carter stared at the floor, his silence a confession. Miller, however, tried one last time to salvage his story. "Sir, my report details the probable cause." "Your report?" Brodie laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Your report is toilet paper. Your career, Officer Miller, is hanging by a single frayed thread. And you," he said, turning his glare on Carter, "you stood by and let it happen. You co-signed this disaster." Before either officer could respond, the door to the office opened. A state trooper in a sharp uniform stood in the doorway, his expression stoic. He stepped aside, and Governor Robert Nash walked into the room. The air crackled with a new and terrifying energy. The governor's eyes immediately found his son. He rushed to Leo's side, pulling him into a fierce hug, a father's embrace that was both protective and profoundly relieved. "Are you okay, son? Did they hurt you?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "I'm okay, Dad. just shaken up, Leo replied, his own voice thick with emotion. After a long moment, the governor released his son. He straightened his suit jacket, and when he turned to face Chief Brody and the two officers, his expression was no longer that of a concerned father. It was the face of a man who held the power of the entire state in his hands, and that power was now focused, like a laser, on them. The weight of what they had done, in all its horrific, career-ending glory, finally crashed down upon Cade Miller and Ben Carter. They weren't just in trouble. They were ruined. The silence in Chief Brody's office was absolute, broken only by the hum of a computer monitor. Governor Nash stood beside his son, one hand resting protectively on Leo's shoulder. His gaze swept over the two officers, Miller and Carter, and lingered there. It was not a look of explosive rage, but something far more chilling, a calm, methodical dissection. He was sizing them up, not as a politician, but as a predator assesses a threat. "Chief Brody," the governor began, his voice a low, resonant baritone that commanded immediate attention. "I believe I am owed an explanation. But first I want to see the report. The one Officer Miller was so diligently fabricating. The word fabricating hung in the air like poison." Chief Brody slid a freshly printed copy of Miller's report across his desk. The governor picked it up, his eyes scanning the first few lines. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He read aloud, his voice dripping with icy contempt. "Upon observing a vehicle with a non-functioning tail light, I initiated a standard traffic stop. The driver, later identified as Leo Nash, displayed unusual nervousness and provided evasive answers to routine questions." He lowered the paper and looked directly at Miller. "Officer Miller, my son's tail light is fully functional. I know this because I helped him replace the bulb myself 2 weeks ago. I've also seen your department's dashcam policy. I trust the footage from your vehicle will corroborate your statement." Miller's face, already pale, turned a shade of grey. He knew, and everyone in the room knew, that the dashcam would show a perfectly working light. His foundation, the very pretext for the stop, was a lie. I may have been mistaken about the light, Governor," Miller stammered, but his demeanor was suspicious. "Suspicious?" the governor countered, taking a step forward. "My son has been taught since he was 14 years old how to behave when stopped by the police. He knows to be respectful, to keep his hands visible, to answer questions clearly. A behavior you might interpret as nervousness, I would interpret as the terror of a young black man who knows that a routine stop can become a death sentence. A terror, it seems, that was entirely justified tonight." He turned his piercing gaze on Carter. "Officer Carter, you were there. Did you witness this suspicious demeanor?" Carter looked up, his eyes wide with panic. He glanced at Miller, then at the governor. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The truth was a boulder in his throat. The governor didn't wait for an answer. He turned to the page of the report. "Let's move on. A search of the vehicle's interior revealed a concealed modified blade, approximately 6 inches in length. A palette knife." He let the words hang in the air. "You arrested my son for being an artist. It could be used as a weapon," Miller blurted out, a desperate edge to his voice. "A fork could be used as a weapon, officer," the governor shot back. "A pen, a set of keys. You didn't arrest him because he had a dangerous tool. You arrested him because he was a black kid in a neighborhood you felt he didn't belong in. You saw him, and you decided he was guilty. You built this entire tower of lies to justify a decision you made in a split second of pure, unadulterated prejudice." He tossed the report onto Brody's desk. It landed with a soft, damning thud. "This isn't about my son being the governor's son," he continued, his voice dropping again to that dangerous, quiet level. If he were anyone else's son, he would be sitting in that cell right now. He might have been coerced into a plea bargain tomorrow. His life could have been irrevocably damaged by your gut feeling. This stops tonight. He turned to Chief Brody. Chief, I want both of these officers suspended, effective immediately. Their firearms and badges are to be surrendered before I leave this building. I expect a full, transparent, and exhaustive internal affairs investigation, and I want the state's Attorney General to oversee it personally to ensure there is no departmental bias. Yes, Governor, Brody said, his voice grim. And let me be perfectly clear, the governor added, his eyes locking onto Miller's one last time. If this investigation finds that you falsified a police report, I will ensure you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Your career in law enforcement is over. The only question now is whether you will end it with a pension or with a prison sentence. The finality of his words was absolute. There was no room for argument, no space for appeal. It was a declaration of war on their actions, delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon. Governor Nash put his arm around Leo. Come on, son, let's go home. As they walked out of the office, Leo glanced back. He saw Chief Brody taking the badges from two men who looked utterly broken. In that moment, he felt a sliver of pity, but it was quickly eclipsed by a profound sense of relief. The cold fury of his father had done more than just rescue him. It had started a fire that promised to burn away the corruption that had put him in that cell in the first place. The day after Leo's release, the Northwood Police Department became a fortress under siege, not from the outside, but from within. Governor Nash was true to his word. By 9 a.m., 2 senior investigators from the Attorney General's office, led by a sharp, no-nonsense detective named Anne Holloway, had arrived. They requisitioned Chief Brody's conference room, turning it into a command center for the investigation. Their mandate was clear and absolute. Find the truth, no matter where it led. Detective Holloway began with the evidence. The first thing she reviewed was the dashcam footage from Miller and Carter's patrol car. The video was damningly clear. As the cruiser pulled up behind Leo's sedan, both taillights were visibly illuminated, glowing a steady, healthy red against the dark asphalt. The audio captured Miller's initial comment to Carter. "Look at this guy. Doesn't belong here. Let's see what he's up to." It was the smoking gun, the proof that the entire stop was pretextual, born from bias before a single word had been exchanged. Holloway's next step was to interview Miller and Carter separately. Miller arrived with a police union representative, a belligerent man who immediately tried to control the interview. Holloway was unfazed. She calmly laid a transcript of the dashcam audio on the table in front of them. "Officer Miller," she began, her tone neutral. "Your report states the reason for the stop was a non-functioning taillight. This audio, taken seconds before you activated your lights, suggests a different motivation. Would you care to explain the discrepancy?" Miller and his representative stared at the paper, their faces turning pale. The union rep began to bluster about context and the pressures of the job, but Holloway cut him off. "This is not about pressure. This is about perjury," she stated coldly. "Falsifying an official report is a felony. Before we continue, I want to make it clear that you are being investigated not just for procedural violations, but for criminal conduct." Miller's carefully constructed wall of denial crumbled. He stammered, contradicted himself, and tried to paint Leo as hostile and threatening. But his lies were transparent against the stark reality of the video and audio evidence. He left the interview looking like a man who had seen a ghost. Carter's interview was a different story. He arrived alone, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. The guilt was etched on his face. When Holloway presented him with the same evidence, he didn't try to fight. He broke. He does this, Carter confessed, his voice trembling. Cade. He calls it proactive policing. He sees someone he thinks is out of place, and he finds a reason. A tail light, a California stop, anything. He has a gut feeling, and he makes the evidence fit. For the next 2 hours, Carter recounted not just the events of the previous night, but other, similar incidents he had witnessed. He explained how he, as a junior officer, felt powerless to challenge a decorated veteran and his training officer. He admitted he knew the palette knife was harmless, and that he remained silent out of fear for his career. "I knew it was wrong," he said, his voice thick with shame. When Leo, looked at me, I knew. But I didn't do anything. I'm just as guilty. While the interviews were underway, the story inevitably leaked to the press. A source within the AG's office, or perhaps a disgruntled officer in the Northwood PD, tipped off a local news channel. By noon, the headline was everywhere. Governor's son, wrongfully arrested, officers suspended. The precinct was surrounded by news vans, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky like accusing fingers. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the department's reputation. Chief Brody was forced to hold a press conference, where he was hammered with questions he couldn't fully answer. He looked haggard and defeated, announcing the ongoing state investigation and promising full cooperation and transparency. Meanwhile, the Nash family was weathering their own storm. They were barraged with calls from friends, political allies, and opponents. Robert Nash shielded his family as best he could, issuing a single powerful statement. This incident has shed a harsh light on the reality that many in our communities face daily. This is not about my son's identity. It is about the abuse of power. I will be using my authority not just to seek justice for Leo, but to ensure that what happened to him happens to no one else in this state, regardless of who their father is. Leo found himself an unwilling symbol. His face was on every screen, but instead of hiding, he turned to his art. He locked himself in his room, not with charcoal and paint, but with a new, furious energy. He began to sketch the flashing lights, the cold steel of the handcuffs, the mocking face of Officer Miller, and the despair of the holding cell. It was his way of processing the trauma, of turning his fear and anger into something tangible, something that could speak when words failed. The investigation was exposing the lies, but his art would tell the truth. Weeks turned into a month, and the investigation led by Detective Holloway concluded with a report that was as meticulous as it was damning. It was a systematic deconstruction of Officer Cade Miller's career, revealing a clear pattern of biased policing and falsified reports, particularly in stops involving minorities. Ben Carter's testimony, corroborated by the dashcam evidence and a review of past complaints that had been previously dismissed, painted an undeniable picture of corruption and abuse of power. The Attorney General, armed with the report, acted swiftly. Officer Cade Miller was fired from the Northwood Police Department, his 15-year career ending in disgrace. But it didn't stop there. He was formally charged with multiple crimes: perjury, falsifying a government record, and a federal charge for the violation of Leo Nash's civil rights. The good bust he had bragged about had become the nail in his coffin. Ben Carter, due to his full cooperation, faced a different fate. He was also terminated from the force, but the Attorney General declined to press criminal charges against him. In a public statement, the AG noted that while Carter's inaction was a serious ethical failure, his testimony was crucial in securing the case against Miller and exposing a deeper problem. Carter left the state, his dream of a career in law enforcement shattered, a walking cautionary tale of the cost of complicity. Chief Frank Brody, facing immense public and political pressure, tendered his resignation. While the investigation found no evidence that he was aware of Miller's specific actions, he took responsibility for the culture in his department that allowed such behavior to fester. The karma for Miller was stark and public. His trial was a media sensation. The dashcam footage was played for the jury, and Carter was called as the prosecution's star witness. Miller's attempts to portray himself as a dedicated officer, making tough calls, fell apart under cross-examination. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The image of the once arrogant officer being led away in handcuffs was broadcast across the nation, a powerful symbol of accountability. In the wake of the scandal, Governor Robert Nash channeled his paternal fury into political action. He used the immense political capital gained from the incident to introduce a sweeping police reform bill, which he named the Leo Nash Accountability Act. The bill mandated automatic review of all use-of-force incidents by an independent body, strengthened penalties for falsifying reports, and funded de-escalation and implicit bias training for every officer in the state. After a fierce debate, the bill passed, becoming a landmark piece of legislation. Leo, once a private art student, stepped into his new role as a reluctant public figure with quiet grace. His first gallery show, held 6 months after his arrest, was titled Red and Blue. It featured a series of powerful, raw charcoal drawings and oil paintings depicting his experience. The centerpiece was a haunting portrait of a young man's face, half illuminated by red light, the other by blue, his eyes reflecting the cold bars of a cell. The show was a critical and commercial success, and Leo pledged a portion of the proceeds to a fund for the legal defense of those wrongfully accused. He had been targeted for his race, judged by a man who saw a threat instead of a person. They had locked him up, believing he was just another statistic. But they had misjudged him, and they had profoundly underestimated his father. The scales of justice, once tipped so heavily by prejudice and power, had been brought crashing back down, a hard, karmic lesson for all who had witnessed it. Leo Nash was free, not just from the holding cell, but from the shadow of that night, having transformed his trauma into a testament for change. 2 years had passed, and the seasons had changed not only the world outside, but the landscape of Leo Nash's life. The name that had once been a whispered headline was now synonymous with a new movement in art, one that was bold, unflinching, and deeply narrative. His gallery, funded by the success of his Red and Blue exhibit, was a bright, airy space in the city's arts district, a testament to his resilience. He was no longer the boy in the back of the squad car. He was a man who had taken control of his own story. One crisp autumn afternoon, while curating a new show, his assistant handed him the mail. Among the gallery announcements and bills was a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from a town he recognized as the location of a federal penitentiary. His heart gave a slight, involuntary lurch. He opened it. The letter was from Cade Miller. The handwriting was cramped and angry. It was not a letter of apology. It was a venomous, self-pitying tirade. Miller wrote of his stolen career, his ruined life, and the injustice of his imprisonment. He accused Leo of using his father's power to exact a personal vendetta. "You and your father think you're heroes," the letter concluded, "but all you did was ruin a good cop's life over a misunderstanding. I hope you're happy." Leo read the letter twice. The first time, a flicker of the old anger returned. The second time, he felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. Miller hadn't learned a thing. He was still the same man, trapped in the same cycle of blame and prejudice. His prison wasn't just the one made of concrete and steel, it was the one he had built in his own mind, and he would likely never be free. Leo folded the letter, walked to the industrial shredder in his office, and fed it into the machine. He watched as Miller's bitter words were turned into meaningless confetti. He would not allow the man a single moment more of his energy. A week later, seeking refuge from the demands of the gallery, Leo was sketching in a small, quiet coffee shop downtown. As he went to the counter for a refill, he noticed the man working the espresso machine. He was thinner. His face was lined with a weariness that hadn't been there before, and he wore a simple apron instead of a police uniform. But there was no mistaking him. It was Ben Carter. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Carter's face flooded with a mixture of shock and shame. He froze, his hand hovering over the steam wand. I'll have someone else get that for you, Carter stammered, turning away. It's okay, Leo said, his voice quiet but firm. I can wait. When the coffee was ready, Carter brought it to Leo's table, his hands trembling slightly. Look, Carter began, his voice low. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I am sorry. What happened that night? It was wrong. I was a coward. I stood by and let my fear of one man outweigh what I knew was right. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. Leo studied his face. He saw no excuses, no attempt to minimize his role. He saw only genuine remorse. What are you doing now? Leo asked, gesturing to the coffee shop. Paying my dues, Carter said with a sad smile. Trying to figure out who I am without a badge to hide behind. I'm taking night classes in social work. Maybe I can help people in a way I failed to before. Leo nodded slowly. He thought of Miller's letter, full of hate and blame, and then looked at Carter, who was taking responsibility and trying to build something new from the wreckage of his life. One man was consumed by the karma he had earned. The other was trying to atone for it. Good luck with your classes, Ben, Leo said finally. It was not forgiveness, not friendship, but it was an acknowledgement. It was closure. Carter gave a grateful, watery-eyed nod and returned to the counter. Leo sat for a long time, the coffee growing cold. He realized the story wasn't just about punishment, it was also about the capacity for change. He left the coffee shop and walked back to his studio, feeling lighter than he had in years. That evening, he stood before a massive new canvas. The sketches of his trauma were gone, replaced by vibrant studies of community, of faces filled with hope, strength, and complexity. The glare of red and blue had been replaced by a full spectrum of color. He picked up a brush, dipped it in a bright, warm yellow, and made the first mark. The past was a part of his story, but he, and he alone, would be the one to paint the future. What began with a lie about a broken taillight ended with the complete dismantling of a corrupt officer's career and the dawn of a new era of police accountability. Leo Nash's story is a stark reminder that injustice thrives in the dark, but it withers under the bright light of truth. Officer Miller believed his badge gave him absolute power, but he learned that true power lies in integrity, and that karma has a way of finding those who abuse their authority. This wasn't just about the governor's son. It was about every citizen's right to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their background. If this story of justice and the powerful consequences of prejudice resonated with you, please help us share it by hitting the like button. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. And share this video with others because every share helps spread the message that no one is above the law. Thank you for listening.